This is the Wausau Cornet Band. Established in 1867, this military-style brass band was the first of its kind in Marathon County, and one of the earliest such groups to exist in central Wisconsin. Although the Wausau Cornet Band would end up being relatively short-lived, it was an important first step in the creation of a wider music scene in Wausau and Marathon County. This band is what you would broadly consider to be part of the concert band tradition. And while the concert band is not as popular today as it once was, even a few decades ago, these groups and the various forms they've taken, from the military and commercial brass bands to the school and community groups, they've been at the center of Marathon County society and culture for more than 150 years. And that all dates back to the Wausau Cornet Band in 1867. So to put this all into context, back in the 1860s and before that, there weren't that many opportunities for people to engage with music here in Marathon County. There were very few people who had any sort of music training or background, and there were even less opportunities for people to learn how to play music. And this was just generally a community built on the frontier to support the lumber industry. The judge and historian Louis Marchetti, in his seminal history of Marathon County written in 1913, drew a direct connection between the arrival of decent music and the civilizing of the frontier. Whenever civilization has elevated rude society or pioneer life, it carries cultivation of art in its wake. The first of all arts developed in civilized life is music, because it appeals directly to one's feeling and sentiment. Marchetti then goes on to note that there were a couple individuals in the area who were playing a crude kind of music in the 1840s and 50s. Notably, there was a man named M. Rousseau, who probably was a French-Canadian coming here for the seasonal lumber work, and he also had some ability and had a violin. And occasionally, he would break it out for special events and on evenings to entertain the people here. And Marchetti talks about him as the sole example of music here, and it's not really a glowing recommendation of his playing. Instead, he sort of sets him up as being the only musician in the area, and the warm reception to his playing was more due to the extremely low expectations of the people here, as opposed to his abilities to play the violin. But that would start to change. In the 1850s and early 1860s, new arrivals, notably the German tradesmen and artisans, were raising the expectations for art in the city with their more sophisticated tastes and ideas. And in the mid-1860s, as people started to move to the area following the end of the American Civil War, these people decided, we ought to have a band for the city of Wausau. It was certainly one of the more unusual circumstances to form a band. It was, after all, founded not by a group of musicians who wanted to play for the community, but rather a group of the community who wanted to find musicians to make a band. At the time, the city of Wausau didn't have enough population to support a professional brass band moving here, and perhaps more to the point, it wasn't the kind of place to which musicians were moving to play professionally anyway. But despite all of that, the people of Wausau decided they were going to have a band, one way or the other. Even in the 1860s, Wausau was an ambitious city, and its leaders wanted to set themselves apart from other communities in the region and to show that Wausau was a cultured and civilized place to live. And so they took up a collection among the citizenry, who liberally chipped in to provide the money for instruments and uniforms. And then they tasked Edward Kretlau with forming the band. Edward Kretlau was one of the few residents in the area to have any musical experience, having played in a band in his youth down in Milwaukee. But he had moved up to Wausau to work in the cigar industry here. Now he was tasked to put together a band. This meant taking all the other community members who had showed some interest and teaching them how to play their instrument, in most cases, from step one. He had to teach them how to hold the instrument, how to buzz their lips to make a sound for the mouthpiece and make a sound on the instrument then. And then he had to teach them the individual notes that they had to play for each song and how the arrangements worked together, and maybe at some point he would get everybody together in one place and they'd have a group rehearsal. And of course at this point nobody's reading off sheet music, so everything would have been done completely by ear. And eventually, once everybody had kind of gotten the hang of things in private, they had some public performances by the end of 1867. It's hard to know exactly how good the band would have sounded back in 1867. Probably it would have been pretty bad by modern expectations, but at the time, again, Expectations weren't that high, and it would have certainly been a huge step forward from Mr. Rousseau's fiddle. To quote Judge Marchetti again, the band apparently, quote, took pride in enlivening every public occasion with their music from a pure patriotic motive, unquote. Edward Kretlau stayed in charge of the band for the first 2 seasons, from 1867 and 1868. During this time, he realized he was pretty good as a band leader, and he was enjoying playing music much more than he was making cigars. And so, after 2 years at the head of the band, he decided it was time to move on and moved to Milwaukee, where performing music was done for money and not out of a pure patriotic motive. It's difficult to track Edward Kretlau's career after he left Wausau. I was able eventually to find a newspaper article from around 1900 that did list him as a musician, in which he was apparently endorsing a dubious patent medicine called kidneyoids. Still, the fact that he was well known enough to be listed in this ad about 3 decades after he left Wausau shows at least that he was somewhat successful as a musician in Milwaukee. Before he left, Kretlau had made sure that the Wausau Cornet Band would continue after he was gone, and ensured that another man named Jacob Vetter would be there to take over the baton in 1869. Jacob Vetter was following in the footsteps of Kretlau in a number of different ways. He was doing the same sort of duties as the band leader that Kretlau had established 2 years earlier, but after 2 years at the head of the band himself, he decided it was time to also call it quits, head back to Milwaukee, and pursue a career as a musician there. Unlike Kretlau, Vetter actually returned to Wausau at the head of his popular band from Milwaukee. In 1877, he was contracted to come up and play for an event organized by the German Club, to great acclaim, although the event itself did not go very well, and the German Club ended up having to go into bankruptcy because of it. But that's kind of a whole other story. After he left, Vetter also made sure that somebody else was in charge of the band, and so in 1872, the Wausau Cornet Band was left in the hands of its 3rd band leader, a man named Richard Baumann. Baumann was probably a fine enough musician on his own right, but reading between the lines here, he was probably not the best man for the job to lead a band. Within a year under his leadership, the band was riddled with drama and interpersonal conflicts. To be fair to Baumann, we don't really know if this was all his fault, or if maybe some of it was inherited from Vetter's tenure, but ultimately it would be Baumann who was in charge when everything was falling apart. Louis Marchetti's account actually lays the blame for this mostly at the feet of a newcomer named Karl Reisenweber, who moved to the area and quickly joined up with the band sometime shortly after this picture was taken, probably in late 1872 or 1873. At one fateful performance of the band, Reisenweber apparently overheard one of the existing musicians who had been in the group for a while criticizing his playing, which made him angry enough to leave the Wausau Cornet Band and start his own competing band. Now, Marchetti's account, written 40 years later, tried to clarify that, in fact, Reisenweber was mistaken in this, that the comment was directed at another new addition to the band and not at Reisenweber at all. But whether it was actually a misunderstanding or not, Reisenweber had had enough, and he was not the only one. Most of the musicians left Baumann's band for Reisenweber's new group, and many of the remaining musicians decided that they had had enough of the drama and decided to retire from music altogether. But while the Wausau Cornet Band may have folded because of this, the city at least still had a cornet-style band in Reisenweber's group. At least for a little while, anyway, because eventually Karl Reisenweber would come to the same conclusions that Vetter and Kretlau had made years earlier. In order to support himself and his band as musicians, they could not rely on Wausau and the surrounding towns to keep them employed. And so in the later 1870s, Reisenweber took his band to Milwaukee, which meant that Wausau once again had no band to call its own. And notably, unlike Kretlau and Vetter, Reisenweber was in charge of his own band, and was not in charge of a community ensemble that was paid for and supported by the citizens of Wausau. And so when he left for Milwaukee, he didn't have any qualms about taking his musicians and their instruments with him, and was not obliged to make sure that there was someone else there to take up his place when he left town. In his oddly poetic way of writing about the event, Louis Marchetti decided that he wasn't going to talk about the end of the Wausau Cornet Band as it folding or falling apart, but rather merely said that it had went to sleep for a while. And certainly the remnants of the old band did get together a few times over the years to play one-off performances at the county fair or the 4th of July celebrations. But the cold reality was undeniable. Wausau no longer had a band of its own. Still, the quiet was only temporary. Short-lived as it had been, the Wausau Cornet Band had at least succeeded in proving that Wausau was no longer the saw log and mill camp that it had been in the 1850s. But over the course of the 1870s and early 1880s, there was this large influx of people settling in Marathon County, and some of them would have some musical aptitude. And maybe among those number, there would be somebody who could pull together the old remnants of the Wausau Cornet Band to establish a new band for the city. Next time, we will pick up with a man named Frank Schubert, who would do just that. And by creating a new brass band for Wausau's increasingly German population, Schubert would make the 1880s the decade of music galore in Marathon County.